welcome back to Speculative Dude Presents. I'm your host, Speculative Dude. Now, today I decided to do something just a little bit different than usual. I will be talking about a movie, but in addition to that, I'm going to be talking about the book it was based off of. And you might have guessed from my shirt, today I'm going to be talking about Jurassic Park. Later I will, in fact, be going into Lost World and the movie tie-in to that, but for starters, we'll start with the beginning. Okay. Now, of course, anyone knows Jurassic Park the movie coming out in 1993. Big hit. For the time, it actually had the highest grossing opening weekend. I don't know if it had the highest overall gross at the time. I'm not sure. It might have. I'd have to double check on that. But either way, very successful movie. One of the earlier movies to use computer-generated effects, and when used in conjunction with the models and animatronics that were used, just came off very, very successful. And surprisingly, most of the special effects hold up pretty well. Some of the computer shots now can look a little off, but you have to realize this is 27 years later, so you would hope that there have been some advances in technology. But like I said, for the most part, though, they hold up pretty well. A couple years ago, it was released when it was released for the 25th anniversary edition. I know a lot of people who went to see it, they loved it. I also got to see it in theaters as a result of that. I didn't get to see it originally when it first came out. My parents were very, very strict. They thought if a movie's PG-13, you shouldn't be 13 you shouldn't see it until you're 13. I was 12, so mind you, the next summer when it was released the next year when it was released on VHS, then I was allowed to see it because I was 13 at that point. Okay, so let's talk about the plot of the movie and the books. Generally speaking, they're pretty close to the same. You have a theme park with genetically engineered dinosaurs put into what they claim is a natural setting. Anyone who understands about zoos and ecology, and especially anyone who's studied prehistoric plant life knows, yeah, it's not very realistic, but okay, we'll go for it for the sake of the movie and the book. Although it is brought up, it's brought up very briefly in the movie. It's brought up to a much better extent in the book. But we have these animals that will be basically on display in a large theme park style attraction, or as the attractions, I should say, in a theme park style setting. Now, you get the cast of characters. Now, there are some changes between the movie and the book. The main cast is relatively the same, but there are a few characters that are a little bit different. I'll go over the cast of characters later, but for the most part, the cast is relatively similar. While on the island, they have their tour. The power goes out due to one of the characters' interference, we'll just say. Yeah, we'll get to that again in a minute. Spoiler alerts for later. But and during their time, how's the right way to say this? During their time trying to get back to where they started, they come across many dinosaurs, have situations. Basically, it's a huge adventure trying to get back. As you can tell, pretty much the same between book and movie for the most part. Okay, so let's start with the cast of characters next. First up, we have John Hammond, played in the movie by Richard Attenborough. Physically, they're very similar. They're both supposed to be relatively short, though I think in the book I believe he's even smaller than... Richard Attenborough is not a tall man by any means, but I think in the book he's even described as being even shorter. In the book, he's very much... I wouldn't say an evil corporate person, but he's definitely somebody who... He's a businessman first. He's not, doesn't really like listening to other people's advice. He has his way of doing it. He helped propel this genetic discovery forward by funding it, and is attempting to reap the profits. Now, while there's technically nothing wrong with that, he's definitely shown as being somebody who cares more about money than actual, than the people surrounding it. Whereas in the movie, it's very different. Richard Attenborough portrays a much more jovial, enthusiastic character who really wants people to experience the dinosaurs and the wonder that he feels when he sees them. I think that's very nice. That from what I heard, Richard Attenborough was actually willing to play either version, but from what I heard, Steven Spielberg, who directed the movie, liked this version better as a little bit more of a friendlier character. So, okay, that's understandable. One thing that he's very well known for saying in the movie, saying multiple times, is the spared no expense. And it's taken in context of, again, to make things as good as possible. It's like we didn't spare any expense in trying to make things as wonderful as we could. Whereas in the book, that line is actually never spoken by Hammond at all. It's spoken by a character who's left completely out of the book, and I'll get to him next. Ed Regis. In the book, he's basically kind of a manager. He runs the day-to-day activities. I would dare say he's kind of like Claire Dearing's character in the Jurassic World movie, the first Jurassic World movie, where he kind of oversees everything that's going on. Now, you have to remember that in the first movie and book, the park is not up and running completely. It's still under construction. So he's overseeing and making sure everything's supposed to go the way it's planned. He's completely removed from the movie at all. Many of his lines being given to either Hammond or Gennaro, the lawyer. And also his traits are mostly given to Gennaro as well, as he comes off as a rather cowardly character. In the book, he says the spared no expense anytime he wants people to see that, oh, hey, look what we did, it's really cool, kind of thing. It doesn't come off, when he says it versus when Hammond says it in the movie, it doesn't come off it doesn't come off as him trying to show the wonder off as much as, hey, look what we did, we spent so much money on this. Yeah, it's more of it feels more like a show-off thing than it's like, oh, here's something amazing that you might like. Now, as I said, he's completely removed from the movie, and his lines are given to either Hammond or Gennaro, who we'll talk about next. Gennaro is the lawyer. Now, in the movie, he pretty much plays an abject coward who runs away when the kids are in danger because he's scared. Straight up. Now, not that I can blame him for being scared, but a lot of people would look at him leaving the kids in the car and it's just like, wow, what a jerk. It's like, and like I said, to an understandable degree. Now, in the book, he's not even there at that time. He's actually still with Dr. Sattler looking at the sick dinosaur. And the difference is in the book it was a Stegosaurus versus in the movie a Triceratops. But yeah, in the book he actually stays with Dr. Sattler to look after that, and also to apologize for a comment he made earlier. In the book, he actually comes off as a pretty likable character. He says as I said, apologizing for the line, he says he didn't know that Dr. Sattler was a woman when he saw that she was on the guest list. He just saw Dr. Sattler and assumed she was a man. And so when he sees her at first, he says, "You're a woman," and to which she just responds, "Yeah, these things happen." And that's why he stays later, to kind of apologize for the situation. It's like, yeah, look, I'm sorry, I didn't realize, I didn't think what I said. But anyway, he actually not only helps to go out and look for the kids along with Muldoon later, he actually goes with Dr. Grant and Dr. Sattler to look for the raptor nest, a plot that's left completely out of the movie. He does take and there are points where he is fearful for his life, but it's a very understandable fear. Reading his character in the book, I would never call his character a coward. Like I said, being just scared of a situation doesn't make someone a coward. It's how you respond to the situation. And like I said, I wouldn't call his character in the book a coward at all. he is a typical lawyer. He wants to make sure everything's going properly. Apparently, he hasn't seen the island, but he does know what's going on. So, like, his wonder and amazement in the movie is kind of interesting because he acts as if he had no idea what was really happening. Whereas in the book, he may not have visited the island, but he knew exactly what was going on. He'd even been in contact with Dr. Grant about dinosaurs when trying to talk about, like, what would baby dinosaurs eat and that. And so there's a lot of changes to his character. I believe his character has probably the second biggest change in the book. The next character is Dr. Alan Grant and Dr. Ellie Sattler. These are also characters where there's a fair amount of change from the book. Dr. Grant, while Sam Neill, I believe, portrays the correct age, I would say, for Sam Neill, in the book, he's supposed to be a large, barrel-chested, big bearded guy. If anyone knows Robert Backer, in fact, his book is even mentioned in the movie. Basically, his appearance is supposed to kind of be based off of paleontologist Robert Backer, and his personality is also very different from the book, which I didn't understand why they felt they needed to change it. In the movie, he doesn't really like kids. He, in fact, seems to kind of find them annoying. The opening scene, he seems to kind of enjoy scaring the kid who pokes fun at the Velociraptor. We'll get to that later. But he, like I said, doesn't really, doesn't want to be around the kids when they're on the island, Lex and Tim. Whereas in the book, he actually really likes kids because he sees kids looking at dinosaurs the way he feels about dinosaurs. He's very enthusiastic about dinosaurs. He feels that kids have the same enthusiasm, whereas most adults would be more cynical and not care as much. He feels that kids have more enjoyment out of it. So that's one of the reasons why he really likes kids, and he kind of he helps Lex and Tim through the island as he does in the movies, but he kind of forms more of a bond with them in the book that I felt. I mean, yes, it looks like he does in the movie, but like I said, it felt a little more palpable in the book. Dr. Sattler, honestly, just like in the book, just like in the movie, she doesn't do a ton. Laura Dern does a good job of playing her, but one of the biggest changes, obviously, is the age of the characters. She's not, like, if you look at the age of the characters, she's kind of supposed to be similar age to Sam Neill's character, and they're not even close in the book. He's supposed to be, like, in his mid-40s. She's in her mid-20s. She's also engaged to someone else who is mentioned in the book. She's engaged to a doctor, I believe he is. And in the book, she was actually a student of Dr. Grant, studying paleontology under him. So, like I said, big difference. They're not in a relationship at all. In fact, in the books, there's basically no romance. I believe, if I remember correctly, Dr. Grant was married at one time and his wife had passed away, and that's pretty much it. So, that's, like I said, she does have a good action sequence with the raptors later in the book, but other than that, she doesn't really do too much. And the whole thing about the Triceratops being sick, she and Dr. Grant kind of both come together to form a solution, which even they're not 100% sure of. But, yeah, she doesn't really do a whole lot there either. So, now, because she does have that action sequence running to the power shed, which doesn't happen in the book. In fact, the one who turns the power back on is Dr. Grant. But she shares that scene with Robert Muldoon. Now, Robert Muldoon is, as described from the book, he is from Kenya. He's spent most of his life hunting large game animals, and then decided later that he wanted to be more of a conservator of animals instead, and that's one of the reasons why he's here. He studies them. He not only is an interesting character, he's one of the more cautious characters. He's one of the few who agrees that, yes, we do need some actual guns on this island in case something bad happens. These are wild animals. They don't know they're genetically engineered. We could get seriously hurt. And there's a debate in the book, or rather, supposedly before the book, there had been a debate, and he had apparently won that they would have some, a few weapons on the island. Hammond really was against the idea. It's like, oh, we're investing so much money in creating these animals, I don't want any of them killed. And it's like, he's a little more cautious. And he actually does live through the entire book. Again, someone else. Just like Gennaro, again, I didn't mention that before, he actually lives through the whole book. He's not eaten. So those are two characters who are not eaten. Let's see. He doesn't have a huge role in the book. He does end up saving Lex and Tim. He and Gennaro actually go out and trank the T-Rex. One of the two. There are actually two T-Rexes in the book, an adult and a juvenile. And he actually does trank the T-Rex. So that's kind of amusing. Or I should say that scene in the book is rather amusing. Next up we have Dennis Nedry, played by Wayne Knight in the movie. Other than the fact that in the book he's kind of described as maybe being a little bit younger, I would say the likeness and the description is pretty much dead on. They do show him complaining about his finances in the movie, which he does in the book greatly. Apparently he was hired at a contract rate. However, once he got into it, he found out that it was a lot more complicated than he wanted, or than he had wanted to do. And Hammond hadn't given him all the details. Apparently he tried to sue and lost because he had signed a contract. You got to be very careful with those. And had to continue. So basically, the work he was doing for Hammond was under protest. Same situation. He's being paid by Biosyn. Now, while the name is not said in the first movie, the character of Luke Dodson is. Now, while Dodson plays a much larger role in the second book, is that he is the one who hires Nedry, gives him the money, and tells him to sneak the embryos off the island. Basically, Dodson is massively, while he is apparently quite useful in his field of bioengineering, he's also very big into industrial espionage. And he will hire, pay, whatever to, steal information so that his company can have it. Okay. Now that happens. Now, what happens next, the character we have next is Dr. Wu. Dr. Henry Wu, played by B.D. Wong in the movie, and I should say multiple movies now. Not only the original Jurassic Park, but both Jurassic World and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. He dies in the first. Spoiler alert: he dies in the book. He gets killed by raptors. One thing that I never understood in the movies are they kind of make it appear as if most of the people are leaving the island for some reason this weekend. He even says when the babies are hatching, he says, "Oh, I hoped they would hatch before I had to get on the boat." And you get the distinct feeling that there are very few people left on the island when the storm hits and everything happens. Whereas in the book, it's very clear that pretty much everything is still up and running. Or I should say, the people were still all there. There's nobody left for it. Anything. Maybe they just did that to try and keep the cast to a minimum, but it's like, meh. So, there you have your list of characters who are, looks like books versus movies, and some of the changes that were made to them. And I almost forgot about them, even though I mentioned them earlier. Lex and Tim. They probably undergo the biggest change in that, first of all, the ages of the characters are reversed. Lex is supposed to be the younger daughter, and Tim being the older son. I will say that this is one of the few times I actually like the changes they made in the movie, because they, actually give Lex a non-bratty personality, despite the fact that she's now the older sibling. And they kind of basically they split Tim's personality from the book between the two characters in the movie. Lex gets Tim's computer knowledge from the movie, or from the book, and Tim in the movie has Tim's dinosaur enthusiasm. So, which is better because in the book, Lex is just basically an 8-year-old brat who literally does nothing of use. She basically whines and cries through the entire book and would rather be playing catch than looking at dinosaurs. Okay. And again, I also almost left out Dr. Malcolm. Dr. Ian Malcolm. Wow. I'm trying to think of the best way, the most polite way to say this. I'll start off with, I love Jeff Goldblum's portrayal. He plays kind of this smarmy, slightly snarky, but at the same time kind of charming character who in the book, well, let's just say in the book he comes off with as someone who thinks he's charming but doesn't realize that everyone around him thinks that he's a massive asshole. I know I don't usually use language in my reviews, but it's like his character in the book is not likable at all. He's a know-it-all. He literally, like, every circumstance in the book is built up to make him look as if he was smart. However, the very first statement that he makes in the book makes him look like a complete idiot. The first time you see him, he's dressed all in black, as Jeff Goldblum's character is in the movie. He's dressed all in black, and Dr. Sadler asks him, "Isn't it a little bit hot for black?" And he says, "No, black is actually the best reflector of color, so it's actually quite cool." It's like, that's, for a scientist, that's actually one of the dumbest things I've ever heard anyone say, because no, black absorbs heat. It retains heat very well. Go sit in a black car for a little while and see how long it takes you to roast in there. It's, it just, so when he's written as supposedly the smartest character in the book, but when the first statement you make is that dumb, it's like, no. It's like he's much, much better in the movie. Much more tolerable in the movie. It's, like I said, the difference is night and day. Now, as I understand it, Michael Crichton was a big proponent of chaos theory, and that's why he gave Ian Malcolm such a large focus in the book. But the problem is there are several times where he just launches into these boring diatribes about predictability and I understand. I've looked into chaos theory a little bit myself, and I am so glad that they didn't do that in the movie. Also, by the time the second book came out, even though Malcolm's character is in the second book, chaos theory's popularity was starting to wane. And, while it is still used sometimes, it's a lot more sparing now. Probably because people simply used chaos theory as it's like, unpredictability, and left it at that. But while I'm not saying it doesn't have merit, it's just the way it's portrayed in the book was absurd. Like I said, Michael Crichton himself was a huge proponent of it, which is also why Ian Malcolm was his favorite character, and despite dying in the first book, he's brought back to life in the second book with the simple explanation of, oh, well, doctors can do amazing things. It's like, doctors can perform miracles. Literally, it's absurd. Dr. Grant even says at the end of the first book that he's not, they wouldn't even allow them to, the Costa Rican government wouldn't even allow them to get Malcolm and Hammond's body. Oh, I guess I left that out. Spoiler alert again. John Hammond also dies. He's not there at the end either. But yeah, I don't want this to turn into an I hate Dr. Malcolm in the book rant, but I really hate Dr. Malcolm in the book. He's a know-it-all and not as smart as he thinks he is. So, okay, plot-wise, as I mentioned in the story, very similar. Not too many big differences, as I said. Like Dr. Grant is the one who actually turns the power back on. There's no electric fence moment. There are some moments, they don't ever reach out and touch the dinosaurs, like have the dinosaurs approach the tree where they're sleeping. There are some moments where they're sitting in a tree looking out and they see the sauropods in the distance, and it kind of reminds Grant of, the enthusiasm, despite the fact that they just escaped from the T-Rex. So there's Dennis Nedry. Surprisingly, one of the most accurate depictions is Dennis Nedry being killed by the Dilophosaurus. While we don't get a visual graphic description in the book, you do get a little bit more graphical description, but surprisingly, it's pretty close to almost exactly accurate to the book. Him getting out, and the Dilophosaurus spitting on him, then it getting in his eyes, and then finally getting in the car, and it pretty much ends with him praying. The dinosaur basically clamps its mouth on his head, and he basically just prays. It ends with him praying that it ends quickly. So, let's see. At the end of the book, the Tyrannosaurus killing the Velociraptors was strictly movie canon only. It is kind of a cool ending. The ending of the book is a little more meh, in that they call for a ride to help to leave, and they end up leaving on flying away on the helicopter. Literally right after they leave, the Costa Rican Air Force, which I don't know if Costa Rica has an Air Force or not, but basically napalms the entire island and kills off everything, which is why in Lost World Jurassic Park, the next one, why they're on a different island. Because in the first one, literally napalmed everything. Everything's dead. So even ones that weren't on there are gone. So, like I said, then Dr. Grant does find out that raptors are in fact leaving the island. So that's always that's kind of a surprising fact. There's no word of that in the actual movie of them having, but it's kind of an interesting, unique look at it. Apparently some of them, smaller raptors, have been stowing away on ships, and then once they get back to the mainland, they're going into the jungles. So, like I said, it's kind of described as having, the way it's described in the book, you would think it was actually a much larger, something like a herbivore, because supposedly they're eating the crops that are lysine rich, but again, it's not really explored. Even in the second book, it's really not explored. So that's a detail I would have liked to have seen more on in the book. Overall, though, the movie, I do actually think the movie is pretty coherent, or cohesive, I should say. It's, following the logic of the movie, it's very easy to follow. The book is as well, but the book is definitely more aimed towards older readers, whereas the movie, honestly, I would even consider the movie a family movie. Despite it being PG-13, I would say it's a family movie. My son loves dinosaurs, and he can even watch this movie. Interestingly enough, here in China, you know that I am still living in China, one of the few edits there are in the movie is when the T-Rex eats the goat, and the leg hits the window of the car. It's edited so that you don't actually see that. I guess they thought it was too bloody, oddly enough. But, however, a few seconds later, as you're panning up to see the Tyrannosaurus, you can still see the legs sitting on there. So it's like, okay, you edited it out from the first part, but not later. Whatever. It's a 2-second edit. So it's like, okay, that one I can understand. So, that's my opinion. The movie is excellent. The book is very good. So, if you like dinosaurs, I hope you would like this. I can't say you will for sure, but and I know there's always going to be some people who are like, it's very inaccurate as far as the dinosaur models go. True. Now, sometimes they chalk that up. It's in additional material since then, a lot of that has been chalked up to, well, because of the genetic manipulation that they had to do to bring these dinosaurs back to life, that's why they appear differently. And okay, I can understand that, but there are a few big differences. For example, and I don't mean just like the feathered dinosaur differences. There's been lots of talk since then, which is fine. a lot of it has to do with the size. For example, the velociraptors in the movie are clearly not velociraptors. The velociraptors were much smaller. The irony of the 6-foot turkey comment is that, yeah, they were about 6 feet from nose to tail. They were actually probably, most of the velociraptors were less than 3 feet tall. So they were actually probably about the size of a turkey. What's actually portrayed in the movie is, and I should say, what's also described in the book as a full-sized velociraptor is actually a Deinonychus. Which, I will say this, I'll give credit on this. The name Velociraptor is a little catchier than Deinonychus, and also a lot easier to see, or say. Say what you want about a lot of the other ones, but a fair amount of them can be excused with differences of what we knew scientifically at the time versus what we know now. The Tyrannosaurus, as being, I feel, is a little bit larger than an actual Tyrannosaurus, but again, genetic manipulation could cause something like that, perhaps. Just in general, I find this to be a relatively inoffensive dinosaur movie. I've actually seen a lot of online, a lot of actual paleontologists say that, they don't watch a movie like this, and I personally agree with this. I don't watch a movie like this to get serious dinosaur information. I watch a movie like this to be entertained. If I want to get serious dinosaur information, I will and do go look up dinosaurs. I mean, that's one of my hobbies, is studying dinosaurs. So, getting information from a movie, no. That's like watching, the old Kevin Sorbo Legend of Hercules show and thinking that you understand the Greek myths. It's like, no. It's like the Legend of Hercules with Kevin Sorbo was not, or I should say, Hercules, the Legendary Journeys, was nothing like the Greek myths. So, like I said, that would be, like I said, watching Jurassic Park. You don't watch Jurassic Park to get dinosaur information, no. You watch it to be entertained with some dinosaurs. So, okay, now I'm going to leave it at that, but, later I will come back and discuss the almost in name only Lost World Jurassic Park book versus movie. So, until then, that's my thoughts. Take it for what you will. Have a good night, everyone. Speculative Dude.